Here's part two of our conversation with the great Marc Jordan. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Canada. As an aside, years ago, someone told me that I was a glass half empty kind of guy because I always said that when I read anything about Sam Cooke, I would always go to the last scene, which I found very disturbing because he was a big influence for me, and it's a heartbreaking story. How old were you when you discovered Sam Cooke?
Young. I was still, let me see, I was still living on Walker Avenue, I believe. So that I would have been, maybe 13, something like that. And wow, he just was amazing. I had a radio. They didn't play much. In fact, I don't think they played any Sam Cooke or many black artists in Canada when I was growing up. And I had this radio, and I attached a wire from the radio to the drain pipe of our house. And I could get Mars on that radio. Just if the wind was blowing properly. If there was the storm was in Kansas, I could get New Orleans, and I could get WABC New York, and it was great.
Wow, I love those stories. Growing up in New Brunswick for me was Buffalo, New York, that whole area, and you do whatever you can to pick up because you feel so plugged in. That's the thing.
Oh, absolutely. We
met in '93, and we were touching on it on Facebook when Bruce Hornsby came in, and I'm not sure if you came in first or I think you came in first, but it doesn't matter. But and I love seeing that picture of you two. You had known him, you had met him face to face before or not?
Oh, yeah. I did a demo with him many, many years ago. I was signed to Warner Brothers, and Bruce had come to L.A. with his brother. They were writing songs, and they were fantastic. But it was bad timing for Bruce because punk was starting to happen. And Marty Cohen, the guy who signed me to Warner's, he loved Bruce. And he wanted to get. He was a like a talent guy at Warner's, and he wanted Bruce on the label, and so he asked me to come in and sit with them while they did these demos. We did demos. I think Mandolin Rain was on there, but early they were demos to try to get Bruce onto Warner's. And that's where I met Bruce, and I loved his music. I'm such a fan. And then, oddly enough, as I said, punk was starting to happen. I lost my deal at Warner, but I ended up on BMG, and the Paul Atkinson, the head of A&R at BMG, heard Bruce and signed it against everybody's advice. He signed Mr. Mister, he signed Bruce, and he signed me. And he had a monstrous success with Hornsby. And Hornsby he's like the consummate musician. I mean, this guy is unbelievable.
Look at and I'm always amazed that. I mean, the guy can do bluegrass. He'll be, Ricky Skaggs, he'll do bluegrass. And he'll go play, with one of the Marcellos brothers. But he just does so many different things, and it's almost like there's no stopping him. I remember asking Mike, why do you never do the same song the same way twice? And he says, because, and I didn't know the term at the time. He said, well, it's because we're loose. And I said, doesn't that mean... He's the first guy who told me that's really bad, man. I didn't know what that was. I guess there was no black in me. I didn't, he had all these terms, but... he's one of those guys, when I first heard him, actually Marina Del Rey did that to me. When I first heard the song, I turned around and I stared at the speakers, which is such a cliche now, but it was one of those songs that made me stop in my track and go, what is that? Because when I'd heard Marina Del Rey, for instance, I can't say that I'd heard someone sing that way with that type of song before. And I needed to tell you, I've always wanted to tell you, there's two songs in my past that I sing in my head the most. One is All the Nasties by Elton John from Mad Men Across the Water, which is probably self-explanatory because it's about being criticized.
Yeah.
And I was never bullied or anything, but I don't know why. There's no reason, right? It's like a song. You either like it or you don't. But Marina Del Rey's another one. It's one of those songs that I constantly find myself singing. I know the words really well.
Wow. Isn't that something?
I've always wanted to tell you that. I always keep forgetting to tell you that. Harbor Lights. Are you familiar with that? I mean, are you familiar with that Hornsby album?
I've heard cuts off it.
Okay. That's after I do Reckless Valentine. Well, first I'm going to do the new album. I'm going to do a piece on the new album. Yeah. Then I'm going to do a piece on Reckless Valentine. And then I'm going to do Harbor Lights after that as another album. Even though it did well for Bruce, he was starting to go away from his commercial, more jazz, blues kind of feel. Or else just tell me something else about Bruce Hornsby if you don't mind. But I'd like maybe one more clip. He's got a unique style of piano playing. I mean, his independence is insane as a piano player.
Yes.
And
well, he told me he still practices every day when he's not on the road. I mean, he practices. And he's very, very dedicated in that sense. He is in total command of that piano. You go and see him live. I went to see him at Kerner Hall, which is a beautiful theater, by the way, in Toronto. It was just him, but he'll do Mandolin Rain, and for the solo, he'll seamlessly go into a Bach fugue. And it is so seamless and so beautifully played that you realize you're in the presence of a master here. This is a guy who has mastered what he does. And mastery is where it's at. Like, it's something, I could never get to that level of musicianship. He is just dedicated, and he's brilliant.
Well, last time I talked to him, I was on the phone. I think it was he had just had his twins who are like adults now. And he told me at that stage in his life, he was practicing 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? Like, where do you have the time? He says, well, now I'm going to I have kids, so I can't do that as much anymore. But when I'm on the road, I might be able to. And I went, what? Seriously?
Yeah. No, I'm telling you, he is a dedicated cat.
When I hear about phrasing, the name that always comes up is always Nat King Cole. When artists tell me, I don't know if do you know John Cody, the artist John?
Yeah.
Well, John, I did, his was the first in the collection of, because all his albums are underrated, but he was one of the many who have told me, he says, I learned to phrase, and it's a term that I think the listening audience doesn't really know what that means, but he says, I learned to phrase by listening to, the bounces, his bounces, the way that he puts words together. And
Nat King Cole was unbelievable. A lot of people say Sinatra was the guy, but it really was Nat King Cole. And phrase, but who was more outside than Billie Holiday, especially when she got older and more frail. She was, and Ray Charles. He could do more. He was beyond belief, really. And it's great. YouTube is the greatest thing because you can go and see the most wonderful performances for the history of pop music, the history of jazz, and it's all there. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's like a school, and you can learn more. It's like online. It's like going to Princeton online or something. It's all there if you want to learn from it.
Yeah. We'll have more of our conversation with Marc Jordan coming up next week. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Canada.